has Nate Silver of 538 come around to the idea of Bernie Sanders potentially winning the nomination? Maybe. Maybe the numbers have forced him in that direction? Maybe. Let's hear what he has to say. This was from a podcast that they have called Model Watch, where they look at statistical models of potential ways the primary might go. And we'll play a little bit from the beginning in a little bit, but I wanted to point out first this specific quote about Bernie Sanders and how the model sort of views him.
No, I think one thing this model convinced me of is I think that Bernie has a decently robust position. If he wins Iowa, he looks pretty good in New Hampshire. He actually polls pretty well in Nevada. And we're looking at polls and demographic-based forecasts in all the states, and it looks like Bernie has, in some ways, a more well-rounded coalition than I think he had 4 years ago. And so the model kind of likes Bernie's chances decently well, but Biden is clearly the favorite here.
Or not the favorite,
the front. I mean,
the front runner.
Yeah.
So you could tell Nate there is kind of tiptoeing around it. I think he knows who his main fans are, so he doesn't want to overplay the fact that Bernie Sanders does well, even in his own models. So he can't leave it out. He can't completely ignore it, but also cannot help but mentioning or pointing out, oh, but Biden is the front runner. Blah, 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 blah. So is Nate Silver coming around to the idea that Bernie might be electable? Not really. I don't think so. Let's go back a little bit further in the episode to just them talking a little bit about the recap and breaking down some of the basic numbers that they came up with.
Delegates. Sanders has a 1 in 5 chance. There's a 1 in 8 chance that nobody gets a majority. Warren has a 1 in 9 chance. Buttigieg has a 1 in 12 chance. And then there's a 1 in 50 chance someone outside of the top 4 wins a majority of the delegates.
I'm going to translate that to percentages. We got really cute with the odds thing last time.
Okay.
But I feel like this audience is
just wonky enough.
Adult enough to be able to handle percentages. And
this is rated adult
mean.
Statistics.
Yeah. So Biden 42%, Bernie 21, no one 13, Warren 11, Buttigieg 10, others 2. That's a plurality, right? Excuse me, that's a majority.
That's a majority.
So if you just want to look at a plurality instead, notwithstanding that you have to win the nomination by a majority, then that 13% gets divided up, and Biden goes up to almost 50-50 to 47, Bernie to almost 25%, 24. Warren 13, Buttigieg 12, others combined 4%.
42% Biden. The actual numbers on the graph there say 43. He said verbally 42, but maybe it's 42 and a half. I'm not sure. And then 21 for Bernie. So, and the way he does this is percentage chance of winning, and he spells out there the majority versus a plurality. And so those numbers also end up being a little bit different. But if you look at that graph pretty closely, it's over time. Their chances changing over time. And so it looks in the graph as though Biden's chances are above Bernie's right after Iowa, and then they kind of converge for a little bit, and then Biden takes off. So it's as though he's saying, look, I think Biden wins Iowa. It looks like New Hampshire is a toss-up. But everything after that, like by the time you get to South Carolina, boy, Biden's going to go up and up and up. And that's pretty conventional wisdom, right? That's pretty, Biden's got the African-American vote, and then the firewall is going to be South Carolina. The other thing that's worth noting is if you look at the methodology here, they're using models based on the last 15 nomination races going back to 1980. So voting demographics in primaries change. And I think particularly in a post-2016 presidential election era, in a post-2018 midterm era, you are going to have larger voter turnout. You are going to have more people from demographics that are not traditionally voting in large numbers. Young people, minority support, particularly Latino support. These are numbers that matter, right? In fact, Bernie pointed out I'll mention it in the other video that I'm uploading today, his interview on Today, that high voter turnout is what we need. And that's everything about the Bernie campaign. So I'm skeptical that this model takes into account some of the structural change in the electorate itself that the Bernie campaign is trying to affect. So how accurate are they going to ultimately be? And while 538 is often held up by particularly mainstream press as this great arbiter of data, and he can divine the polling information and tell us the real chances. The reason they do that is back in 2008, he correctly predicted the general election vote of all 50 states. Very data-driven campaign. That campaign did conform to a lot of the standard voting practices going back years and years. And he ended up being very accurate there. What people don't seem to point out very often when they still look at 538 and there's amazing data-driven results is he gave Hillary Clinton a 90% chance to win in 2016. And that is 90% wrong. That's not a way of phrasing that. That doesn't really make sense. But he was dead wrong. That was not a thing that happened. I mean, everyone sort of thought that. That was the prevailing establishment wisdom. There are those of us who did not think it was going to be that much of a landslide. I'm happy to admit I thought, and it was things like that. It was things like 538 that were convincing me, like, I know it seems like Hillary's doing really poorly, and it seems like there's a lot of enthusiasm around Trump's campaign among, conservative voters. Like, he's running as a populist. That's going to help him. But all of that, even for me, I was just like, I can't. This is the data guy is saying that Hillary's got a 90% chance to win. I was a little bit surprised. I was wrong. For reasons like that, you need more than a grain of salt when you're talking about Nate Silver and 538. I recommend a salt lick.